Hey everyone, Chris Joslin here, your host for this edition of The Chris Joslin Show. We are brought to you as always by iLevelLogistics.com, a source for your news, your information, whether you're inside or outside the transportation supply chain logistics industry. This is the site for you. Come join us, part of the community, share your opinions, share your pros and cons for what you hear and listen to and read. Some of the stuff's aggregated, some of it's curated, and some of it is proprietary, but all of it is for you. Today, we are also sponsored by Orion Solutions Group. One of the co-owners and founders of that group is joining us today to have a little bit of a chat about some of the interesting observations that he is seeing in the transportation world. Without any further ado, Mr. Dave Porter. But Dave, I really think this is a good idea to have kind of a collaborative, ongoing dialogue. You've been in this business. One of the few people I know that's been in this business actually longer than me.
Yeah.
So you've accumulated a vast wealth of knowledge in probably more segments of our industry than you've ever wanted to accumulate, but you do. And you've got all that knowledge packed in there, and sometimes it just spills out. So I'm hoping some of it spills out today.
Yeah. So what I tell the kids, and I think, and you've experienced this, what I like about the industry, what I've enjoyed about the industry is, it sounds boring to be in one industry for 30 years or however long. It's more than that now, 34 years, right? But I've been in operations, I've been in management, I've been an individual salesperson, I've been a sales leader, I've run companies, operations, I've been on asset, non-asset, and really I've never had the same job more than maybe 5 years or something like that. But I've been exposed to all these different areas, and it's kept it fresh for me. So that part's been cool.
Yeah, it's funny. I did a short interview with a guy that used to be a CEO for a food industry organization. And he and I were talking about this a week or two ago. And he was saying that the best thing he teaches all the people he works with is to do the blocking and tackling, do all the little stuff and see, this is a difficult position, I think, for the industry today, because there's a lot of people going through classes like you're teaching right now.
Right.
That you're trying to get people enthused to get about the industry, which they should be if they want to look at it's in the headlines. It seems like every day now, but they also don't want to get into the business at the ground level. A lot of them want to kind of jump over that and go right into some kind of middle management or position of leading teams, et cetera. And you really can't do that without understanding the basics.
Well, I think that's a mistake. And so what I tell the students is that, if you're in college, you're going to probably have some kind of a job, right? You're making some money. And what are you doing? You're probably waiting tables, making pizzas, selling electronics at a retail store, some kind of thing like that, just to get by, to have money to pay your car insurance and stuff like that. And I tell them, I said, you know what? Work at a warehouse, drive a forklift. If you're interested in supply chain, that fundamental knowledge that you'll get, understanding how a dock works, how a warehouse flows and all that, that'll benefit you as a CEO, 20 years down the road. So why not start, and build on top of something? And hey, I was talking to somebody in the Inland Empire just today, entry-level warehousing, labor, barely can speak English. You don't have to have a high school diploma. $19 an hour, right? So if you drive a forklift, you get more. If you drive a yard truck, you get more than that. That's okay money,
Yeah, no, it's good money. It's in an industry that's growing. that needs the diversity you're talking about. Now, I would say, though, that in the headlines just yesterday or the day before or something like that was this whole thing in California about the wages on fast food people going up. So
Right.
the interesting thing, of course, with that is anybody can read the tea leaves on that. If you start with an industry like that and raise the level to approximately $22 an hour or whatever it's supposed to be, number one, they're going to automate more. But the jobs that are there are going to be valuable jobs. But it's going to push jobs like you're just talking about into a level even above where they're at now.
Right.
Now,
right.
That all runs downhill to those of us that are buying whatever goods are stored in that warehouse eventually, and that's another conversation. But ultimately, the wage itself, the earning capability of someone coming out of university or even going into the business without that degree is way above what it was 30 years ago when we were getting into it. I mean, nobody even knew what they were getting into.
Well, yeah. I mean, you and I didn't, that's for sure. And
yeah. Well, I do blame you. I blame you entirely for that, by the way.
Yeah, I guess. I'll take the credit for getting you hooked on that drug. But yeah, I don't know. It's well, it is going to drive automation, and that's super interesting to see. I think that there's some benefits to the whole economy and actually the security of the country on that, because if you think about why so many companies offshored, right, it was because of labor costs, right? So the more they automate, the less desirable it is for these companies to locate offshore, and they can at least nearshore to a more friendly and closer country that's more manageable from a supply chain standpoint. So, I think there's good and bad in it.
There is a lot of reshoring and nearshoring that's occurring in part because of this disruptive nature of the supply chain, the worldwide supply chain over the last, in particular, couple of years. It's like, it's when you have a system, you can't just simply stop the system and start it and expect no volatility and none of this accordion effect kind of stuff to occur. So there's always positive and negatives, right? And one of the byproducts of this is that there is a lot of reshoring and nearshoring coming back. And the drive for automation, of course, there's always an equation these clients and manufacturers and things use to determine, okay, how much money do we want to invest in automation versus the potential of offshoring? But now with the added risk of volatility of getting product to the country that wants to buy your product, man, it's better to put it here and pay a higher wage, right?
Absolutely, it is. Yeah. Have you had the chance yet to take a tour of a Amazon warehouse?
I have not done an Amazon warehouse. I've done, Walmart warehouse, and I did some big DCs back east that were very automated. I saw some automation probably 10 years ago that I was shocked with, so I can't imagine what it's like now.
Yeah, it's all over YouTube. So I show the students this stuff, right? And it's just amazing the level of automation. And you think about, okay, these robots, if you will, were 24/7, less down for some kind of maintenance or recharging because they're all battery operated. They don't sue you, right? They don't throw their back out. They don't go on strike, So there's a lot of benefits from the business owner standpoint. I think probably to going in that direction. Although they would never acknowledge that, they would just say, "Oh, these are tools to make our workers' lives more enjoyable." But
and it's interesting to see how a lot of this will happen, because I know a lot of the knock against the ports in the United States as compared to ports elsewhere is that there's this kind of unusual and oftentimes unbalanced system between the unions that control a lot of the personnel there and how they require certain numbers with their contracts, et cetera, compared to the amount of automation that occurs. And, I think it's better to have a balance than to swing further in one direction versus another. So I think that's the right thing to do. But it also puts us in a position of kind of moving on or moving toward goals more methodically than other countries, which can often be very nimble and just go straight after the automation like crazy. I wonder if warehouses are looking at that same kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, Elon Musk, for his Tesla factory said automation. No, he said human beings are underrated. Right. And they really automated, and they found out, what, these people just do. And he has the world's best automation in robots. Right. custom designed for his application. And so he says, hey, these people can do things that the robots can't do, So I think there's, like you said, there's some combination of the two that's the optimal solution.
Well, I think there's always something missing. If you're task oriented, if it's easy enough to pull apart the data points and program it into some sort of automation, then yeah, that's a task that can replace a human being. But the one thing that also drives the potential for the human beings that are involved in those industries to be better and more adept at doing all the other stuff that's necessary to grow it, which is important when you have students that are coming out of the logistics field that need to know data analytics and all that kind of stuff, but a way to apply it properly and engineer it into the system.
Yeah. Well, the other advantage too is look at the jobs that we're talking about automating right now. Fast food workers, order takers, and they're having a very hard time filling those jobs. I was talking to the operator of a warehousing company today. Can't get enough warehouse workers because as we speak, it's, I think, 110 degrees in the Inland Empire in a warehouse. And so who wants to, and what the temperatures get inside of a container, it's like 130 or something crazy like that in there. So who wants those jobs, right? And if you can get some type of automation in and out, they don't care. They just work it, right?
So let me ask you, Dave, segueing this thing into something that we have talked about in the past as well. You move automation from, there are warehouse management systems are mapping problems, right? There. Mm-hmm. So if you have automation that can use laser technology or lines on the floor, or however they manage this process, shelf variability, knowing where the stock is at, moving it around, doing all that kind of thing. It's pretty simple. It's static. And even some of the ports have some of that going on, moving chassis and things around. There's a particular name for it that I can't remember. But when you move that onto the roads, there's a whole set of other challenges, right?
Yeah, and I think they found it, even just for passenger vehicles, more difficult than they thought it was going to be. Just all the poorly marked roads, signs are missing, things are there that they don't expect that shouldn't be there, and you have to avoid those things. But it sure seems like it's coming. And I was watching some video just yesterday, I guess in Phoenix. Do you see these Waymo vehicles? Do you see a lot of autonomous vehicles being tested on the freeways or anything in the Phoenix area?
I've never seen it. I know there are specific areas, but I've never even seen it here.
Yeah,
at all.
Well, I heard, and maybe it's not true then, that it's somewhat common, because I think Arizona is kind of a friendly place to test that type of technology. But I don't know, what are we, 80,000 drivers short right now?
Well,
right?
that's why I brought this up, because, there's a lot of, you can debate the validity of that number versus a higher or a lower number with the speed of transactions. I know you and I have talked about this before. If you, at least according to MIT Transport Labs, if you get a driver on the road 14 more minutes a day, you solve that problem. The problem is that there's disparate entities that all have their own agendas and KPIs and things that they're worried about, that are worried about those 14 minutes being on their side of the ledger versus the driver's side of the ledger. So there's no synergy there. So one way or another, you got to fill those roles.
Right. So, I think the problem is everybody has their network that they're trying to optimize, but they're sub-optimizing the greater interconnected network, right? So a receiving location is optimizing their financials and their labor and everything to their benefit, but creating a line a half a mile long of trucks to get into their facility, right? And we've seen this. We know the facilities, we know the industries where this is widespread. But, we were talking earlier about driver shortages, and, I've always maintained that it's really a lack of respect for the driver's time that's the issue, much more so than not enough drivers wanting to do the job. Now you owned a trucking company. I've been involved with running a trucking company. And if you drive with the driver or been a driver, you understand the discourtesies that you get on the road. how long they make you wait at a security checkpoint, getting into a yard, how long it takes to get even assigned a door or a spot to drop your trailer or container. Some of them won't let you leave until there's an empty available to pull out of there. They'll physically almost, it should be illegal, lock you in the yard. You can't even leave until there's an empty to take out with you. And you're tying up valuable people and assets. And and then you've got the whole idea that everybody does all their work in a kind of a 8 to 6 time frame where there's nobody on the road in the middle of the night. These guys could get twice the efficiency in the middle of the night if we truly had 24-hour shipping and receiving. There's so much low-hanging fruit to get more out of the existing drivers. And then the other thing that we talked about is something on the order of all Class A drivers, only like 3 or 4% of them are women. So you got this whole other pool of people you could draw from to take these jobs. A lot of opportunity out there.
Yeah, I think you're right on the nose there with that. I mean, you can talk about a lot of aspects of that, but the ultimate answer is there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there. There's a lot of areas that you can focus on to get efficiency. But you said something a moment ago that kind of caught my ear, and that's I think you said, I'm not sure if you said optimization or optimizing the system. You got all these disparate entities trying to optimize their own set of issues, and all they are is bumping up against each other, and they got to put it in a hierarchy. And that hierarchy usually puts the drivers at the very bottom, unfortunately. Yeah. And it's a disrespectful place for them to be in what I consider is, I still do. I consider that the most important element of what we do, that high touch aspect, whether we're talking about tech or not. You've got to have a driver getting that lading to and from where it needs to go. And it has to be a more driver centric system, if you will. But back to the optimization thing. So my viewpoint is that that's what regulations should come into play for, to help optimize the system as a whole, to look at the pieces you and I have just talked about and say, okay, how can we help manage that bigger umbrella to a point where we can draw some of the efficiencies into it and fill the gaps with more women drivers or more efficient onloading and offloading and all those different things you talked about. The problem is, though, is that most of the regulations I've seen kind of at least initially have the opposite effect and make it even harder. I don't know if you have a point of view on some of that, but that's kind of what I see.
Yeah, those that think that they're optimizing their own little world and getting away with sub-optimizing other people, their suppliers or, other stakeholders, ultimately, I think they're mistaken. And you know well from running a trucking company that, if you have this whole idea of a shipper of choice, right? If you got the guy that's holding up your drivers all day and they're just bad actors, what do? You either don't allocate them capacity or you say, oh, yeah, I'll go there, but I'm going to charge you that plus 50% or some, they are going to pay a price because capacity is often very scarce, right? So I don't think that sometimes people realize the price that they are paying for not being a shipper of choice. And I think those that do treat drivers well, let them use a clean restroom, give them a nice break area, respect their time. I think I know that they get better rates and better service as a result of that. Right. And it just doesn't show up as a hardline item on an Excel spreadsheet. So, you can't go to your boss with that and get a raise, But there is certainly a downstream effect to your point. If you're treating those drivers in a suboptimal way, consistently, they're not going to want to go there. But the interesting point to that is it's all supply and demand, right? And and our industry, especially on the West Coast, is very seasonal and cyclical, and of late it's crazy, but normal circumstances, if there is such a thing anymore, is there are ups and downs. And one of the major things that's occurred on the West Coast, of course, is the whole AB5 controversial, implementation and all the things around that. And there are positives and negatives to everything. So I'm not going to, I've got my position on that. It might be different or the same as yours. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But the reality is if you push or pull people into positions where they're
where the companies are required to make people employees, then that cyclical flexibility is diminished somewhat. You know, you've got to maintain, because I think statistically for long haul drivers, I don't know about drayage, but for long haul drivers, there's over a 90% turnover rate.
Oh, yeah. Well, it depends.
And it's huge.
For long haul drivers.
It depends on dedicated versus non-dedicated. There's a lot of criteria to that. But when you add that to the fact that the industry itself, I shouldn't say the industry, but the driver part of the industry is treated often as poorly as it is.
Yeah.
I think what's happened a lot of times is these people fall out of the industry and they just don't want to climb back into it. And so how do you replace
particularly in a market that's like 4% or whatever we are now, unemployment rate, right? People have a lot of options, and they're just not going to tolerate, the complaints that you hear from drivers. Everybody wants to make more money. So you'll hear that, but a lot of it just has to do with just being treated respectfully and just common decency. They just want the common courtesies and all that type of stuff. And whether it's from, their dispatchers or loading docks or wherever it may be, that goes an awful long way. I mean, think of a normal office job. I don't care how much money you're making or what you're doing. It's always great to make more money. But if you have a boss that's just giving you a hard time all the time, you'll probably quit. You'll say, I'll go find a boss that'll treat me halfway decent, or I'll get into another line of work. And I think that's part of what's happening here.
Well, I know that our set of drivers, we didn't have a great deal of turnover. We would hire some people that weren't quite right, and they would go away fairly quickly. But once they were engaged, and it was really about regular kind of routes for us, regular routes with quality interactions between who you're picking up from and who you're going back to, et cetera. So it was a matter of consistency, I think. And I think you're right. I mean, there's always, personnel volatilities occur within every company, I'm sure.
Right.
But again, smoothing that out and making a more driver centric thinking pattern or process went a long way for those guys, for sure.
Yeah. But, back to your automation piece, I am super interested and find it fascinating. When are we going to get to autonomous, Class A drivers? And it is, from what I see, it looks like there's going to be an iteration to get there, right? Probably platooning with the second truck in the back being autonomous and wirelessly tethered to the lead truck,
right.
And then probably the highways and freeways will be kind of like the railroads. Those will be.
That's where I was going to go with it, right there.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And then local driving, maneuvering around yards, things like that. That'll probably be the last to go. But I think that's a great opportunity. I mean, there is, again, an area where we don't have enough labor, solves a problem, brings down costs. I mean, everybody's piling on board for this, whether you're Peterbilt or Tesla or somebody else. They're all coming out with their electric autonomous versions of a tractor. And I think the economics are just too compelling, from a savings in fuel to labor to maintenance on these trucks, and it goes safety, on and on and on.
Well, time will tell, of course, and statistics will come out 5 years from now on the first X number of years of implementation on one of these iterations you're talking about. But I do believe you're right. I think there was a trucking company in Texas, I don't remember the name of it, that had a 5 truck train, if you will, on the road from one town in Texas to another, probably a very straight, level road, but the first one had a pilot or a driver in it. The rear one had a pilot in it and nothing in between. There was 3 in between. So they were tethered electronically to, however they tethered them to each other. And it made me laugh because the first time I read about that, I went, oh, it's a train. It's a train. That's what it is.
It's a train. It's a train on the freeway. And God forbid you're the person trying to get onto an on-ramp when this train's going by. I mean, how you ever...
Well,
Two
that's
coming
an
together.
infrastructure thing, right? That's an
Yeah.
infrastructure thing, right? Is it going to be on a dedicated lane? How is that going to be managed, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of complexity to all this, and ultimately, I had this conversation with an EV guy I know the other day, and it's not, because I have certain things about I've said this a million times. I'm more of an incrementalist than I am a abrupt about face change direction and burn it all down and start over again. But I know that everybody's on board with this. I mean, when I say on board, everybody has to be. It's going in that direction. It's not.
Yeah.
That train is left the building, as they say, right? So.
Yeah, I think whether it's electric vehicles or automation, or I think you could certainly argue that maybe there's things being put in place that are going to force that before we're even ready for it in terms of being able to buy electric trucks or whatever it might be. But that's the direction that we're headed. And, at some point down the road, we'll look back and say, hey, remember we were talking about that? We didn't know when it was going to happen. Well, this is the way it's done now.
Yeah. Well, that's good stuff. Good stuff. And I think we should consider this a preamble to a longer conversation at a later time, because this is going to be an evolving kind of situation. I am sure of that.
There's a lot of pieces to pull apart there. That's for sure.
Well, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in for this edition of the Chris Joslin Show. I am your host once again, welcoming you to our platform, iLevelLogistics.com. Be a part of the community. Share your feedback. Get yourself an email that comes to you right in your inbox daily to give you the highlights of all the important elements in the supply chain, transportation, logistics industry today. And we look forward to having you push the button of, I'm not sure which direction it is, but there's a picture of my mug right there, and you can click on that and be a subscriber. Go to Apple Podcasts, go to any one of the platforms that you're interested in. See us on TikTok and Instagram, etc. Come follow us. Come be part of the community. And we'll see you next time on another edition of The Chris Joslin Show.